Today, we say goodbye to Richard Williams.
Dad promised me the company.
You're lying.
None of you deserve
Stop it. This is Father's funeral.
Why are you fighting over my money?
Impossible. No.
Dear God.
Welcome to Stephified Stories. Let's dive in.
3 days earlier, Richard Williams was one of the richest men in the city. At 68 years old, he owned construction companies, hotels, and properties worth millions of dollars. But Richard had a problem. He no longer trusted his family. For months, he had watched them change. His oldest son, Derek, only called when he needed money. His younger son, David, constantly pressured him to sign documents. His daughter, Rose, always asked about the value of his properties. And Kate, the youngest, seemed more interested in luxury vacations than family gatherings. Even his wife, Margaret, had become distant. One evening, Richard sat alone in his study. Across from him sat his longtime lawyer, Daniel Carter. Daniel had worked with Richard for over 20 years. "Daniel," Richard said quietly. "Yes?" "If I died today, do you think my family would miss me?" Daniel hesitated. The question surprised him. "I think they would." Richard smiled sadly. "You hesitated." Daniel looked away. Richard stood and walked toward the window. "I have spent my whole life building something for them." "I know. But lately, I feel like they are waiting for me to die." Daniel remained silent, because deep down, he feared Richard might be right. A week later, Richard called the family together. Everyone arrived quickly. Whenever Richard called a meeting, important business was usually involved. The family gathered around the dining table. Richard looked at each face carefully. Then he spoke. "My doctor has given me bad news." Instantly, everyone became serious. "What happened?" Rose asked. Richard sighed. "The doctors found a serious heart condition." The room became silent. "They believe I may not have much time left." Margaret covered her mouth. Kate started crying. David looked shocked. But Richard noticed something strange. Derek lowered his head. Not because he was sad, because he was hiding a smile. Richard felt his heart sink. The meeting ended. As family members left the room, Richard quietly followed them. What he heard next broke him. In the hallway, Derek whispered to David, "If this is true, we'll finally get control." David nodded. "We just have to be patient." Richard stood frozen. His own sons talking about his death like a business opportunity? That night, he could not sleep. And before sunrise, he made a decision. He would test them. Every one of them. The next morning, Richard called Daniel. "What I'm about to ask sounds crazy." Daniel laughed. "When have you ever been normal?" Richard leaned forward. "I want the world to think I'm dead." Daniel nearly fell from his chair. "What? You heard me. Richard, that's impossible." "No." Richard's eyes hardened. "It isn't." For several minutes, they discussed the plan. The details were risky, dangerous even. But Richard was determined. If my family truly loves me, they'll prove it. And if they don't? Richard looked away. "Then I need to know before I leave them everything I've worked for." Over the next few days, only Daniel and Richard's personal doctor knew the truth. Then the announcement came. Richard Williams had supposedly suffered a fatal heart attack. The news spread everywhere. Business partners cried. Employees mourned. Friends paid tribute. And inside the Williams mansion, something unexpected happened. Instead of grief, there was excitement. The very next day, the family gathered in Richard's office. Daniel arrived carrying several folders. "Your father's official will be read after the funeral," he explained. Immediately, Derek stood up. "After the funeral? Why wait?" Daniel narrowed his eyes. "Because those were Richard's instructions." Derek sat back down angrily. The meeting ended. But before sunset, the fighting had already started. Rose accused David of manipulating their father. David accused Kate of stealing expensive jewelry. Kate claimed Derek had secretly transferred company funds. Soon everyone was shouting. The mansion that once held family dinners now sounded like a battlefield. Hidden cameras installed by Richard recorded everything. From a secure location, Richard watched every second. And each argument broke his heart. The children he had sacrificed everything for were tearing each other apart. Not because they missed him, because they wanted his money. Then Daniel discovered something even worse. Someone had secretly created forged documents. Documents designed to steal the entire estate. And the person responsible was much closer than Richard expected. 3 days later, the church was packed. Hundreds attended. Business leaders, friends, employees, neighbors. Everyone came to honor Richard Williams. Everyone except one person. Richard himself. Hidden in a nearby room, Richard watched the service through a monitor. He expected sadness. Instead, he saw something disturbing. Derek and David were whispering during the pastor's sermon. Rose was texting constantly. Kate was arguing with someone outside. Even Margaret seemed distracted. Finally, the pastor finished. And exactly as Richard expected, the fighting started. "It belongs to me!" Derek shouted. "No, Father trusted David more!" Rose yelled. "Both of you are greedy!" Kate screamed. Guests gasped. The argument became louder. The funeral was turning into a public disgrace. Richard looked at Daniel. Daniel nodded. "It is time." Richard took a deep breath, then walked toward the church doors. The church doors slowly opened. A warm breeze swept through the room. At first, nobody paid attention. Everyone was focused on the argument. Then someone near the back gasped. "Oh my God." Another person stood up. A woman screamed. The shouting stopped. Every head turned toward the entrance. And there he was. Richard Williams. Alive. Standing tall. Looking directly at his family. For several seconds, nobody moved. Nobody spoke. It felt as if time itself had stopped. The pastor nearly dropped his Bible. Rose's mouth fell open. Kate began trembling. David looked like he had seen a ghost. And Derek turned pale. "Impossible," he whispered. Richard slowly walked down the center aisle. The church was so quiet that people could hear his footsteps. Step. Step. Finally, Margaret stood up. Tears filled her eyes. "Richard?" "Yes." She rushed toward him, but Richard raised his hand. "Not yet, Margaret." She stopped. The coldness in his voice shocked everyone. Richard walked to the front and faced the crowd. "I owe everyone an explanation." Nobody dared interrupt him. For the past week, the world believed I was dead. He paused. I allowed that to happen. Gasps filled the church. "Why?" someone asked. Richard looked toward his children. "Because I needed to know who truly loved me." His words struck like lightning. Derek looked away. David swallowed hard. Rose began crying. Richard's eyes filled with disappointment. And what I discovered broke my heart. Daniel stepped forward, carrying a laptop. The lawyer connected it to a projector. A large screen lit up behind the altar. Richard nodded. Play it. Suddenly, video footage appeared. The church watched in silence. There was Derek, laughing. Once the old man dies, everything changes. The guests gasped. Another video appeared. David was speaking. We should sell the hotels immediately. Then another. Rose arguing over property values less than 24 hours after Richard's supposed death. Another. Kate demanding expensive jewelry before the funeral. One video after another. One secret conversation after another. Each clip exposed greed. Each clip revealed selfishness. Richard watched tears roll down his wife's face. The evidence was impossible to deny. The family members looked ashamed. But the worst revelation was still coming. Daniel opened a folder. His face had become serious. There is another matter. The church became quiet again. Someone created a fake will. Murmurs spread through the room. A fake will? The pastor asked. Daniel nodded. This document attempted to transfer nearly all of Richard's assets to a single person. Richard looked toward the front row. The guilty person immediately lowered their eyes. Daniel continued. We hired investigators. He pulled out another document. And we discovered who forged it. The room held its breath. Slowly, Daniel turned toward Derek. Derek Williams! The church erupted. No! Impossible! People began whispering everywhere. Derek jumped to his feet. That's a lie! Daniel calmly held up evidence. We have the signatures. Another paper. We have bank records. Another paper. We have emails. Derek's face turned white. You can't prove anything! Then a voice spoke from the back. Oh yes, we can. Everyone turned. Two police officers entered the church. The entire room froze. One officer approached Derek. Mr. Williams, we need to speak with you regarding fraud, forgery, and attempted theft. Derek looked around desperately. Nobody came to his defense, not even his own siblings. For the first time in his life, he realized money could not save him. As officers escorted Derek away, Richard thought the nightmare was over. But Daniel had one more surprise. Richard, his voice sounded hesitant. Richard frowned. What is it? Daniel looked uncomfortable. There's something else you need to know. Richard felt his stomach tighten. What? Daniel took a deep breath. The forged will was not Derek's idea. The room became silent again. Everyone stared. If it wasn't Derek, then who? Daniel slowly looked toward Margaret. Richard's wife. The woman he had loved for 40 years. Margaret immediately shook her head. No. Richard's heart pounded. No? Daniel opened another file. The investigation revealed that Derek acted acted under someone's instructions. Margaret's face lost all color. Richard felt his legs weaken. Margaret! Tears streamed down her cheeks. I can explain. But Richard already knew. After 40 years of marriage, after decades together, his wife had secretly encouraged Derek to secure the inheritance. Not because she needed money, but because she feared Richard planned to leave most of his estate to charity. Richard looked devastated. Was any of it real? Margaret broke down crying. I was afraid. So you betrayed me? I never wanted to hurt you. But you did. The church watched in painful silence. There were wounds caused by strangers, and there were wounds caused by those closest to us. The second kind hurts far more. As emotions overwhelmed everyone, a quiet voice spoke. Father, it was Kate. Richard turned. She walked forward holding a small envelope. I have something to tell you. Richard waited. Kate handed him the envelope. What is this? Open it. Richard carefully unfolded the papers. His eyes widened. Inside were receipts, bank statements, charity records. Richard looked confused. Kate lowered her head. For years, I've been helping children at an orphanage. Richard blinked. What? Kate nodded. The money I requested wasn't for vacations. Tears filled her eyes. I was supporting children who had nobody. The church fell silent. Richard stared at the documents. Every receipt was genuine. Every donation was real. For years, she had hidden it because she didn't want attention. Richard felt tears forming. All week, he had assumed the worst. Yet one child had quietly been doing good while everyone else chased wealth. For the first time that day, Richard smiled. A real smile. Then he pulled Kate into a hug, and both of them cried. A week later, the family gathered again. This time, there was no funeral, no fighting, no shouting, only truth. Richard stood before them, holding his actual will. I've made my final decision. Everyone listened carefully. I will still provide for my family. Relief appeared on several faces. But wealth without character is dangerous. The room became quiet. Richard continued. Each person will receive enough to live comfortably. Then he smiled. But most of my fortune will establish scholarships, hospitals, and homes for children. Nobody argued. Nobody complained. Because after everything that had happened, they understood. Money was never the most valuable thing Richard possessed. Wisdom was. Character was. Love was. Those things could not be measured by bank accounts. Months later, life looked very different. Derek accepted responsibility and began rebuilding his life. David learned to value relationships over wealth. Rose reconciled with her father. Margaret spent months earning back the trust she had broken. And Kate continued helping children, now with her father's support. One evening, Richard stood on his porch, watching the sunset. Kate sat beside him. "Do you regret the test?" she asked. Richard thought carefully. It hurt. Kate nodded. But sometimes the truth hurts before it heals. The old man smiled. For the first time in years, he knew exactly who was around him for love and who was around him for money. And that knowledge was worth more than every dollar he owned. Greed can destroy families faster than poverty ever will. An inheritance may reveal what is hidden in people's hearts, but character reveals who they truly are. The greatest inheritance parents can leave their children is not money, houses, or businesses. It is integrity, kindness, honesty, and love. Because when wealth disappears, character remains. And character is the treasure that never dies. The end.
I've made mistakes I can't